That's right. Bear down, Bears fans. It's time for another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast, Bears Banter, powered by Second City Gridiron. Bill Zimmerman with you. And I am excited because as we record this podcast, it is Masters Week. And a tradition unlike any other is EJ Snyder in draft season on the Bears Banter podcast. Of course, EJ was long time with Windy City Gridiron, and you can catch him now with the Bear Era podcast and, of course, Bootleg Football with Brett Coleman. And EJ is going to be doing everything. We're going to give us everything we need to know about the NFL draft. And he joins me now. EJ, Bill Zimmerman, how you doing?
I'm going to give you everything I can give you. I don't know about everything. Everything I know is yours. What that's worth is up to everybody else. We'll see.
Yeah, well, I think this is going to be a really interesting draft. And I brought this up on my last podcast with Courtney Cronin, that last year I had more time to look at prospects. And this isn't me trying to pat myself on the back. It's more about what the draft was like. I think through like 21 or 22 picks, like my personal big board, it was like those were the 21 or 22 guys that went off the board. So yeah, I was happy with that. But at the same time, I don't think I'm not you. I'm not Mel Kiper. I'm not Daniel Jeremiah. But I thought that draft kind of played out the way I think a lot of people did, not exactly on the picks. But this year, I think is going to be the wild, wild west out there in terms of where these guys are going in the first round. So my first question to you is, now I know we have first round grades, second round grades on guys. How many, if there was such a thing as top 10 grades, how many players does EJ Snyder think this is a top 10 caliber prospect this year? Because I don't think there's 10.
I don't think there's 10 either. And it's half the prospect and half the teams that are picking, right? Because teams have needs and they also have types. And not all players fit all types for all teams. So when you get into, when I really think about top 10 players, or we talk about blue chip players, or there's a lot of labels for kind of can't miss players. And one of the biggest things about those players is they are good enough to be scheme agnostic. They do not need particularly a certain fit because of their physical skills or their wide range of abilities. They'll fit just about anywhere. They're going to succeed just about anywhere. And that list in this draft, I think, is really short. It is a handful of guys, maybe 5 or 6, where you could drop them in any offensive, defensive system around the league and say, yep, they're going to have the kind of impact that I would expect out of a top 10 draft pick.
Yeah, I agree with that. And when you're talking about those guys, I assume Mason Graham, Abdul Carter, and Travis Hunter would be three out of those guys.
Mason Graham is not for me. The other guys are. He's outside. He's a very good player. I think it's his particular case is really odd, and he's kind of vexed me all draft season. I like him. He is a very high effort player. He's had good production, not great, but good production on a very good line. And I think he's a very high floor player. And that is not a backhanded compliment. I think he will succeed in the NFL. Do I feel super confident taking him in the top 10 and feeling that he's going to be an impact maker, difference maker, the kind of, tilt the field player we're talking about? I'm not that high on him. Would I take him in the first round? Absolutely. Would I sleep pretty well if I needed a defensive tackle in that mold? I would. He is a good, solid player with great production. I just think some people are putting him in heights that I don't particularly, and that's okay. That's one of the beauties of draft season.
If he, and I don't think he will, let me preface it there, but if somehow he fell to 10 and a lot of those other marquee names are gone, would that be a pick you'd be comfortable with the Bears taking?
I wouldn't love it for multiple reasons. The Bears are decent. They definitely need defensive tackle, but there are like literally 40 defensive tackles in this draft.
It is deep, yeah.
So outside of guys like Abdul Carter, who you mentioned, Travis Hunter, who is a unicorn, he's not really replicable. I believe Ashton Genty is that way in the running back class. I think Omarion Hampton's up there, but not quite there. He's kind of like Mason Graham for me. Very high floor player, can absolutely be RB1. But like outside of those top 3 guys where you feel like if I don't take this, there's a shelf to the next guy. I think with Mason Graham, we'll see, because again, it really depends on which players come off the board in terms of, I don't think Chicago's going to get great looks at 10. And we'll talk about that, but is a very strong possibility the way this draft board falls. There isn't a great choice for Chicago. There is not a slam dunk, absolutely must have player. There are variations of, yes, he's a good player. He's very useful. We like him. But my little sticky note for this draft for the Bears is get out of the first round with a good football player. Just do that, right? It's kind of like the draft day thing. It's not a name no matter what. It is get a good football player no matter what, and then go to work with 39 and 41 where the value really starts to line up.
All right, so let me ask you about a few 10-ish prospects,
Sure.
that the Bears could be looking at here before we kind of try and play out the top 10 here and kind of see what potentially would be a realistic, batch of players. Because like you talk about, they may not be in a good position at 10. Like I kind of played out a scenario on my last podcast where they could be in a really bad, unless you're like a big Hampton fan and you're okay with them taking him at 10, they could be in a really sticky spot. Now, and I'll present that scenario to you. But since you brought up Hampton, you brought up Genty, let's start with running back, because I am a big believer in one, this is a deep running back class, and there's going to be excellent ones at 39, 41, potentially even in round 3. And I do think the running back value that high in the draft is a real thing. The contracts in terms of, how much you can get out of a running back in terms of the length of the career, I think is legitimate. And Ashton Genty, in terms of mileage on his tires in college, is got about as much mileage in the last 20 years as anyone. He's had like 830, 840 touches. I mean, there's only a handful of guys that have had more than that. And a lot of Cedric Benson, D'Angelo Williams, a lot of them didn't have great careers. So let me ask you about Genty first. Do you have any concerns about the tread on the tires at this point in his career? And like you said, you want to get a good player. Are you okay with a running back at 10?
Yeah, I think when people have the Genty discussion, they lean on what has happened in the past. And this year is not the past. This draft is very different than other drafts. And typically, I would say, yes, a running back in the top 10 is a bad value. People say, well, you can't do it. And I say, great, who will you pick? Again, given a scenario, when you get to 10, if he's on the board and there are a couple other players, name the player. People say, they never say player. They always say a position group, right? Well, you have to take offensive line. Great. Which offensive lineman in this draft are you taking instead of Ashton Genty? Assuming Membu's off the board, right? Like, what do you take? And people go, well, and look, I understand that people don't dig into players, but a lot of people do dig into the first round and are knowledgeable, but they don't want to have to make that call. They just say it's not a running back, so you can't take Genty. And they don't ever really say anything about Genty. You did with tread off the tires. And yes, it's always a concern in terms of tread. You also have to look at the player, the production, and where he sits relative to all his peers, all the running backs drafted in the last 10 years. He is an exceptional running back prospect. And that's what people forget. They go, well, he's a running back, so he can't be exceptional because it's in the top 10. Those two things are not the same. He can be. And if he is chosen in that range and is exceptional, a lot of people will go, well, he was the one. I think he is the one. And so I'm okay with it because I think he is that much better than the other running backs in this class. And I think he would be a great fit because of two things in Chicago. One, they largely have addressed the offensive line issues. I don't think they're done doing that, but they have done a much better job, I think we can agree, than they have in the previous 3 years. And they have a new head coach who understands how to use a running back who is a weapon. And Genty is certainly that. So if those two things weren't true, and Robert Mays says this, he said, I'm not sure the Bears have eaten enough of their vegetables so they get to have dessert in the top 10 about Genty. I feel like they have eaten their vegetables enough to get a guy like Genty, and he would be prepared to make a difference for them that would be commensurate with that pick. And like you said, they might be in a sticky spot. He may well be. If he's on the board at that spot, he's almost certainly the best football player left in the draft at that point.
Yeah, and
he fits in Chicago.
And I think he probably won't be available at 10.
I think that's true too.
So. Again, based on, like you talked about, not a lot of high-end talent here. But let me talk about another position that doesn't get a lot of high draft investment. That's tight end. with Tyler Warren. If you want to get in the Loveland, you can. But where are you in terms of Tyler Warren as a tight end prospect, and if he was the selection at 10?
I really like him. I believe he's TE1 in this draft. He and Colson Loveland are my top tier. It's 1-2, and then there's a break. So very similar players in terms of grade, very different players on the field. The reason I would be okay with Tyler Warren, again, people say, oh, you can't take a tight end in the top 10. I understand that. In a typical year, you probably can't, but he, again, could be the best football player left on the board. He is extremely versatile. Penn State lined him up all over the place. Ben Johnson, as we know, loves versatility in players. He loves trick plays. Warren was a high school quarterback. He threw touchdowns. He caught touchdowns, lined up as a center. Like, Penn State has used him in every way imaginable, and that would be really cool. And I think he's a good complement to Cole Kmet. Like, this isn't Cole Kmet slander. There's going to be a lot of 2 tight end sets. And if your 2 tight ends are Cole Kmet and Tyler Warren, you're in a much better spot than the Bears are right now with their tight end picture, which is Cole Kmet and
Smythe. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
nice tight end 3.
Yeah, exactly. So, and Ben Johnson doesn't even necessarily love tight end 3. He loves his 6th offensive lineman, which I can fully approve of. So, like, I see the fit with Warren. I also understand all the lamentations about value. I get it. But my question is then to everybody that says that is present them a scenario and say, what would you do? And there aren't great or easy answers. There are other answers for sure, and they too can be justified. But going back to the sticky note, you got out of the first round with a very good football player. Tyler Warren is good at football. He's not just an athlete. He's not just a projection. He is a very good, very versatile football player. Job well done. Move on and try not to cry about it too much.
Yeah. All right. Let's move over to the offensive line, because I think in a perfect world, if there was a sweet left tackle prospect sitting there at 10, that's the direction the Bears would like to go. Is that going to be the case? They're going to have to, squint to do that. But, if someone's there, I don't think, and you can disagree with if you want, I don't think Josh Simmons is the type of guy that can go at that point in the draft. He's probably a little bit later. Probably not someone who's going to be there 39-41 for the Bears. So I think that's kind of a sticky one there. But Will Campbell and Membu, I think, are the 2 guys that everyone's focused on right now. Of course, Membu really has only played on the right side. Campbell, you've got the length. Is he an inside guy? But if he's an inside guy, he's rarely, he's 2-point stance a lot. So there's some projection issues there with Campbell. But again, like, to me, when I watch Will Campbell, I see a really good football player that has the skills that could potentially overcome the length issue or whatever. I think he's more of a left tackle than a left guard. I'm curious what you think on that, because I think ideally this is the position for the Bears, but is it going to be something they can attack? Because when you're looking at building an offensive line, you can't pay 5 offensive linemen, and they need to extend Darnell Wright next year. They've paid 3. You can't focus on free agency or paying Braxton Jones as well. You just can't invest that much money in the line, to me. So they really need a left tackle coming up here on a rookie contract. Can they get that done at 10?
They can, but there are qualifiers, as you've laid out really well for Will Campbell, and also with Membu. So I think you're right. If there was an absolutely cherry left tackle prospect sitting there, I think the Bears would be quite happy with that pick at 10. There's not this year. That's just the case. Membu is an extreme athlete. He is also a very good right tackle. The question is, can he project to left? And that doesn't really have anything to do with being a good athlete. It has to do with whether or not a guy can do it. And some guys can. I know Kyle Long came out and said, hey, I was fine playing on either side. That's great. Kyle's one of the guys that could. We also know plenty of guys that can't. I've talked to many offensive linemen, and I asked them this question, like, would you be okay going from your current position, whether it's tackle to guard? And I also asked them, would you be okay flipping sides? Some people say, yes, I'd be fine with a position switch. No, I would not be fine with sides. Some people say the other thing. I wouldn't be fine moving inside, but I'd be okay playing left because I don't really have a problem with it. And it's sort of like one of those things. We grew up playing baseball, right? I could hit from either side of the plate. I was much better in a right-hand batting stance, but I could hit for average from the left. Is that what you want at 10 with Caleb as your quarterback, as a guy that hits for average as a left tackle? It's not. He's got to be dialed. And they're not going to know that until they work him out and talk to him and literally put him through his paces and see if that translates or see if it looks notchy. And they're going to have to make that designation with Membu. Great player, great athlete, great right tackle. Can he play left? We don't know. Will Campbell, definitely a tackle for me, but definitely a premier pass protecting left tackle. And those guys make money in the league. I see a very high end pass protecting left tackle. He is a tough guy in the run game. He's got strong hands, really good grip, but he plays with very odd leverage because he basically is already upright in his pass stance when the ball is snapped. And that's how he plays. So all these people saying, well, if you take Will Campbell and he doesn't beat out Braxton Jones, as a rookie in the first couple of games, you just play him at guard. Well, you're telling me that a guy with an upright stance that doesn't play with a ton of leverage is a really good guard or is going to beat out Joe Thuney or Jonah Jackson. So you're going to take 10 invested in a left tackle and sit him on the bench until you likely figure out whether you're going to pay Braxton next year. If you think people are howling about value for running back or tight end, talk about howling value about the bench, right? And it's very possible that it's hard for all rookies to start. Is Will Campbell going to be a good, solid left tackle in the league? I think he is. The other thing about Will Campbell is people also talk about him kind of like a demigod, like he doesn't get beat. He does get beat. He has losses. All tackles have losses. And, then when you look at, I'm not going to say struggles in the run game because he doesn't struggle, but he is pretty system specific. I would not pick Will Campbell if I was a big power gap man team where I was just expecting him to try and root out guys one-on-one. I don't think that's his happy place. Zone, absolutely. He's got good feet, moves really well, picks up targets in space. He can do all that. And once he latches on, he looks pretty good. So again, it's like, boy, at 10, that's a lot of qualifiers. That's a lot of ifs. And I'm not sure what you do with him if Braxton Jones is playing well through the offseason. You sit him, your 10th pick, your football team's that good. It's just not great. You talked about Simmons a little bit with the knee. Again, we're not a doctor. We're not going to get those medicals, but there's also some clouds about people aren't talking about him really well. And it's been a while. It's not just smoke season. And again, I don't have any of that information. So I've heard it from multiple sources. Again, I don't know where they got it. So I'm not going to spread it because I get really sensitive about people saying, character or whatever, if it's not a legal issue or something that we know about that's public, unless I have direct information, which I really don't most of the time. But there are a lot of whispers about, there's a lot of people in his current program that don't love him. And I'm like, well, what is that? And I don't know. But am I going to take that at 10 combined with the injury? If it was just on tape, I'd be totally happy with Simmons. He is a great left tackle, both pass protector and run blocker. As a football player, he's awesome. But as we know, in the top 10, it's more than that.
Yep, absolutely. So this last part, I'm just going to kind of lump defense all together here because, obviously there's Jalen Walker, there's Will Johnson, obviously a couple edge prospects as well. I think the Bears would like to go offense with that 10th pick, but there may be a scenario where it may be difficult to find an offensive player that you can take at 10. So what are a couple of the defensive players you think are top 10 caliber, at least in this draft, or someone potentially that the Bears could consider?
Yeah, it's rough as well. And you end up with qualifiers really quickly. I know people are going to be like, EJ, it sounds like nobody's clean in this draft. And after about pick 3 or 4, yeah, the decisions all get pretty gummy. And that's why this draft is not typical and why it's very difficult to say typical things about this draft. Like you don't do this or you never do that, or that's a bad investment. In a typical year, I'd agree with you. This is an atypical year. So again, I think edge would be a place the Bears would be looking. Typically, you're picking top edges in the top 2/3 of the first round if you're looking for the highest caliber guys in terms of athletes and production. Mike Green is one of those guys. He's got off the field issues. I don't think the Bears are going to pick him. Would he be a great fit as a football player? I actually think he would. I've heard a lot of people say, he doesn't fit Dennis Allen's system. I think he's got enough skills. I came into this draft cycle thinking that he might be a little more pigeonholed as a pass rusher. After I did my full workup on him, I was like, nope, green check for, football skills in terms of setting the edge, stopping the run. You have to be a complete player to be picked in the top 10. I think Mike Green is. I don't really think he's on the Bears board. If he is, he's much farther on down.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if he's just off their board altogether.
Not at all. And James Pierce, who physically is a better fit for Dennis Allen, and a lot of people are focused on that. His production was very good, but again, there are whispers about, stuff off the field. And that too is going to be a factor in Chicago. It always is. So your top 2 edge rushers in terms of value, guys that you would be looking at in the top 10, are probably not options for Chicago, even though it's a great need for them. And then you're skipping down to guys like Donovan Izraku out of Boston College, who is not a guy I'm going to pick in the top 10. I like him, but that would be a stretch for me. You go back to the defensive tackles. Is it Mason Graham? It's not for me. Is it his teammate, Kenneth Grant? Kenneth Grant is physically dominant, but he needs to be more consistent. Are you picking that guy in the top 10? Would he fit with the Bears? He would, but I think, again, if he lasts at 39, that's a very different conversation. If you pick Kenneth Grant in the top 10, you better be sure that your defensive line coach can get out that top end effort every single play. And I'm not sure they're that kind of sure about him. So you end up looking at the rest of the defensive tackles, maybe Walter Nolan, right? It's value-wise, not great. I love Walter Nolan as a player out of Ole Miss, the defensive tackle. I think he's super versatile. I think he's going to be a great pro. But at 10, it gets really sticky. So trade downs are going to be tough because valuation in this draft is so even. Nobody's going to be willing to pay full price, I don't think. There's not a ton of quarterbacks that people are going to move up for if one slides. So again, lots of typical things don't apply in this draft. And it leaves you with a lot of eye of the beholder. Hey, we just really like this guy. He's a good football player. We think he's a fit. We've met with him. We're totally comfortable with him. We're just going to pick that guy at 10 and move on. And it might not be the player that Bears fans, have their heart set on because they root for that college or whatever else.
So what about Jalen Walker if he's not picked in the top 9? Is that someone who could fit in the Dennis Allen system? It seems like he's a very versatile player. Depends on what kind of system he's in terms of how he get used.
I think that is exactly the case. You hit the nail on the head. Jalen Walker is a bit of a physical outlier in the fact that he is, I think, better off the edge. I really like him working from that angle of the field. He is physically very skilled, but he's short, right? And he's light. He came in over 240 at the combine, which was a big win for him, but he didn't typically play that heavy. And, he's just barely over 6 foot. So a lot of teams are going to look at him and think of him in a very specific, almost third down type of rushing role. And everybody says, oh, well, you can just slide him back and have him play middle linebacker when he's not. I've seen him compared to guys like Frankie Louvu. And I'm like, he cannot do the things in the middle of the field that Louvu can do on downs, 1, 2, and or 3, and then get moved to the edge and be an effective rusher. I think he's a better rusher off the edge, maybe even than Louvu. But I think you move him elsewhere and his effectiveness declines. So that's a tough call at 10. You better be extremely sure about your role and the way you're going to use him, because we've seen guys who are great athletes but somewhat positionless get miscast in systems and basically fall off the earth. Isaiah Simmons was a guy like that everybody said. And Simmons was taller and faster, right? He was 6'4", and
he was a draft darling.
Yeah. And incredibly skilled player, but Arizona couldn't figure out what to do with him. And so he languished. And again, does that make a good pick in the top 10? Jalen Walker's a good football player. He knows how to play football. He has production, but you have to be really specific and hold to that role and not kind of get called by the siren song of, well, he's really good, so we just want him on the field, or he's, we picked him in the top 10, so we have to play him, and then end up asking him to do things that he's not great at. And that's going to be the challenge. Because of that, I think he's going to be a little bit lower on the Bears board, and somebody else will probably bite at that apple first.
All right, interesting. So let me ask you about a player who the Bears are not going to draft, but I think has a significant impact as to what the Bears are going to be able to do at 10, because he's going to impact if an additional player gets down to them, and that's Shedeur Sanders. Because, he had been slated as first or second quarterback all season long. Then Cam Ward kind of took that role, and it was like, well, he's going to go second or third. And then it just more and more comes out, and he keeps getting bumped further and further down. Now it looks like he may fall out of the top 10 completely. I know we've heard some things, that maybe the Jets could take him, maybe the Raiders could take him, maybe the Saints could take him. And I think in terms of when you need blue chip players to slide, you need quarterbacks to come up and take those spots. And Shedeur, I think when this draft process started, people just assumed he was the top 10 pick. Now I'm not so sure. I think on the gambling boards, his over under is 8.5 for his selection. And I would hammer the over in that, because I just don't, I think he could fall all the way down to like Pittsburgh, like in that level. So where are you on Shedeur Sanders in terms of anything that you heard or might know in terms of how solvent he is as a top 10 pick?
Yeah. And that is all over the board. And I'll just start with my personal stuff. So I watched Shedeur Sanders when he was at Jackson State, and I was impressed. I thought this is a player, like, if he stays there, this is a player that is going to really elevate that program and the profile of that program, because he's probably going to get drafted in the first round when it's all said and done. If he stays at Jackson State, obviously he didn't, made the big move to Colorado with his dad, and that only elevated his profile. And I didn't watch a ton of Colorado. I watched some for sure, and I was pretty impressed with what I saw. And so I just kind of held that opinion. But as you know, I do early watches in draft season, and then I go back and I do what I call my full workup. And that's stats, physical stuff, testing. And I watch, in the case of a top quarterback, at least 3 games. And when I did that with Shedeur, I was kind of surprised at what I found. I went in expecting, again, based on everything I'd seen over the past 2.5 years, to really like him and believe that he was solidly, top of the first round quarterback. Again, he has his limitations. I was aware of those as well. Going back this year, like, they did not have great protection at Colorado, and I came away underwhelmed with Shedeur Sanders in a way that I did not expect. Again, I started higher on him based on everything I'd seen before. And he's going to need to go to the right place. And the right place is somebody that is going to ask him to throw into fairly tight windows over the short to medium distances in the middle of the field. And if they're going to ask him to do full field reads and throw a ton of anticipation throws, I don't think they're going to be very happy with the result. And he is a lesser athlete than I thought he was. Everybody keeps saying average, and he's at the lower end of average. Like, he thinks he's faster than he is, and it shows up on tape over and over again. Like, he's running away from mid-tier college guys, which, again, there is a huge speed jump when you go to the NFL, and they're catching him in college. Like, he's thinking he's going to get away, and they drag him down for a 3-yard loss. He thought he was just going to be able to keep running. He's not as fast as I thought he was. Everybody talks about the limitation in the arm. He has, again, a good arm out to about 20 or 25 yards. He can really drive the ball to that. And he can throw arcs down the sidelines, but that ball is not great for him, and it is not consistent. And a lot of the offense was Travis is down there somewhere, and Travis Hunter bailed out Shedeur Sanders a lot. If you take Travis Hunter away from that offense this year, and Deion Sanders isn't his dad, I'm not sure we're having those conversations about Shedeur Sanders being anywhere near the top 10. So quarterback value in the draft is very tricky. If you don't have one, you get very desperate. I actually think the Saints would be a pretty good fit with Kellen Moore. Like, Kellen Moore is going to ask him to do a lot of those things that I just said that he's good at. And again, if he gets picked at 9, it's still a lot of pressure. He's still eventually going to be the guy, and we'll see how that works out. But that's as good a landing spot as there is. If he is anointed the savior for another franchise, forced into a starting role with a full NFL slate of offense, I don't think the results are going to be great early. Now, I'm not saying he can't learn through that and figure it out, but I would still call him a mid-tier quarterback at his top. And that is a tough call to take in the top 10 value-wise. Now, does it happen? Happens all the time. People always overpay for quarterbacks, but I'm with you. I think Saints is a likely landing spot. And if he goes before that, I'm going to hold my breath a little bit, because I think it's going to be a bumpy road.
All right. So let's look at this the best way we can to try and get an idea of where you think who might be on the board here for the Bears at 10. So just quickly, Ward, Carter, Hunter, it doesn't matter the order. Are you pretty comfortable thinking that that's going to be probably the top three, or at least they're gone well before the Bears have any chance to select them, correct?
Yes, I believe that's true. I watched Cam Ward right after I watched Shedeur Sanders when I did my full workup, and boy, is there a difference between those two guys. So I think the Titans will select Cam at 1, and then yeah, Hunter and Carter are going to be really hard to lay off of as just, again, blue chip prospects that will work anywhere because they're that talented.
If those 3 are off the board for the Patriots, is it definitely offensive line, or could you see a Mason Graham or them, with Vrabel there, could you see them doing something a little different?
I think they know they have to protect Drake May, so I think it is Membu or Campbell, depending on how they see it. But I would be surprised at that pick if they went anywhere else, because, yeah, they have a lot of needs. They need defensive tackle as well. They need wide receiver, but they can get those later in this draft. If they like Membu, I would probably pick him because he is a very athletic guy, and you need to protect Drake May. They know that's their path to victory.
Let me jump from there to the Jets at 7, another team with offensive line needs, but also we've heard a lot of Tyler Warren talk to the Jets. So what do you think would be the smart move for the Jets?
Sure. It's difficult. I think you need to build the lines first. It's back to that vegetables and dessert conversation. I think Tyler Warren would be a great fit, but if there's a tackle there, again, I talked to Connor Rogers a fair bit, a noted Jets fan / sufferer, and offensive line has been the chalk pick for them for a while. So I think the Warren noise, the Warren static is certainly possible. Again, great football player, but if there's an offensive lineman there, they think they can really build that line or rebuild that line with, they'll probably go that direction.
I don't know if you could put a number on it, but what are the odds for you that Campbell or Membu are available at 10? Just one of them getting that.
Yeah, Membu, it would be almost 0. Again, because he's an extremely good tackle, and there's not a lot of super clean tackle prospects at the top. And we're kind of used to that. We're used to having 3 or 4 that are like, oh, it's debatable as to which one's the best, or hey, all 3 of these guys are going to be long-term starters. I don't know if that's true. So he feels like a surefire to me. Again, very good tape already and room to grow. So I think he's gone. Campbell, again, I think the league's pretty high on Will Campbell. I think he's probably off the board at 10. He's the more likely of the 2. I would say it's, I don't know, maybe 35, 40% that he's there at the top end. I think it's probably less. But again, don't love his fit for the Bears. So he's one of those guys I'm like, yeah, he could be there, but I don't love the pick. I don't love the value. I don't love the fit. So I kind of look past that, even if he is, which is not what you want to have. Like you said, if you're trying to get players to fall down that you like, you want to be sure that they're going to be off the board to take up one of those spots. And I'm pretty sure Will Campbell will be one of those spots, but I wouldn't bet on that one. Membu, I would bet on him being off the board.
All right, let me ask you about the 5th and the 6th spot, because every mock draft in the world pretty much just has Mason Graham going to the Jaguars. It almost just seems like the default pick here. Raiders, there's a little more flexibility, but a lot of people are circling Genty as the Raiders team, which obviously makes a lot of sense with Pete Carroll there, with the Geno Smith move. This is clearly a team that is not looking to tear things down to the studs and build a young group. This is a team that's trying to figure out a way to get competitive as quickly as possible. Getting Genty in there makes a lot of sense. So what do you think about the 5th and the 6th spots?
You're right in terms of Mason Graham being the chalk pick. He has been since before the combine. He's sort of one of the steadiest picks there. The sort of dark horse pick there would be one of the corners if they love him, but I don't think they're going to have a higher grade on them. So I think Mason Graham is, again, if you're leaning betting odds, it's better than 50%. That's going to happen. The Raiders to Genty I could see because some of the picks they have made on the offensive line, and like you said, this is not a team that is looking to tear it all down. And Pete, for the most part, didn't invest super high picks in the offensive line early. He used those picks for other players, or John Schneider did. So now we'll see how much that preference is. But Genty would certainly fit what Pete would like to do on offense. That's for sure. And getting Geno Smith completely changed their offseason landscape. Just radically changed what they're going to do through the rest of free agency and certainly in the draft. Because again, if they were one of those quarterback needy teams, we'd be talking about them too, as many were before the Geno move.
All right, and let's talk about those NFC South teams at 8 and 9. Carolina, I think a lot of people are looking at that as the Jalen Walker team. Ted McMillan's another name I've seen tossed around there. I think Carolina could go a lot of different ways. And the Saints, to me, I don't understand the Saints. I don't know what they're going to do because I don't understand the organization. Like for years, I've been looking at that team like, all right, you're in draft, you're in cap hell, just tear it down. Have the year where you're eating the money and start over, but they just keep punting it down into the future. So I really have no idea what the Saints are going to do because, like I said, I just don't know the direction they want to go. So what do you think about those two positions?
Yeah, I believe you're probably right with Carolina in terms of defense. And there has been a lot of talk about Jalen Walker, and I can see him being an asset in Ejiro Vero's defense. And Ejiro Vero has used guys like this. He did when he was with the Broncos. And so he's got familiarity. They need firepower on that side of the ball. I could see that pick and value lining up pretty well. Wouldn't be surprised with receiver either. If they're, enamored with Tet, they need that as well. But I think they might have a higher grade on Jalen Walker. We'll see about that. In terms of the Saints, I'm with you. This is going to be a wild draft. We've already said that like 10 times in this podcast, but they are the wild card team in wild draft that, yes, they could take Shedeur. Yes, they could go to other sides of the ball and replace things that they could go straight by their board, because I doubt Shedeur is the highest graded player on their board. But again, if Kellen sees the things that he wants in a quarterback that he wants to work with, he will pick them, right? That will happen. And we don't know if that's true, but I would not be surprised by it at all, which that line of 8.5, yeah, go for the over because Saints are at 9. They could make probably 5 picks here. That wouldn't surprise me. And it's just, I think things get shaky at 4, at 9, like they blow completely up. So
yeah, and I think, and that's where let me lay out this scenario for you, and then I'm just going to say there's no trade down partner available. Who's EJ Snyder going to select in this situation? So let's assume that the top 3 are the top 3 as expected. The Patriots go offensive line. Let's just say it's Campbell. It doesn't matter. Graham goes 5, Genty goes 6, Membu goes 7.
Yep.
And we've got Carolina and New Orleans. Let's say Jalen Walker goes, and let's say Tyler Warren goes.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
All right. That's the thing. Like a lot of people, well, if Sanders goes, then Tyler Warren will be there at 10. And, okay. Yeah. But let's put Tyler Warren off the board. That's where I say why Shedeur Sanders going top 10 is so big, because it should bump a Will Campbell or a Warren, maybe Genty, something to the Bears at 10. But if he's not there, there's a pretty good chance, I think, that scenario I just laid out, that those are the 9 players taken. If those 9 players are taken and the Bears cannot find a trade down partner, who would you want them to select at 10?
Yeah, this one is the rough one. This is the nightmare. This is the nightmare scenario. And there's different versions of rough. And conversely, on the other side of the coin, I don't think there's any great version of clean. Now, we could see a completely topsy-turvy top 9 that leave, maybe 2 of these guys available. And that would be about the cleanest scenario there is, but there's still all the stuff with positional value and whatever else. This is the worst. This is the lockdown worst, because players left on the board are like Jahdae Barron, like in terms of value, like Jahdae Barron, one of the top corners, or Nichols, however you look at him, great player. Bears have that. They really don't need him. So cross that guy off. Mike Green, we talked about him, cross him off. Will Johnson, same thing, injured, top corner, outside guy. Do you take him as value? What are you going to do with him this year? I actually think Tyreek Stevenson fits really well with Dennis Allen's system in terms of what he asked corners to do. So he's primed to have a big year. And again, he's already sunk costs. So Will Johnson, kind of cross him off the board. The receivers who are typically talked about in this range, like Tet, or some people really like Luther Burden. I'm not one of those guys, but don't love it. And again, Bears have really good receivers. So we're 4 or 5 players deep here, and we're just crossing them off because they're terrible fits, right? They're not bad football players, but they're not great fit for where the Bears are right now. And then you get down to guys like Donovan Izraku and Kenneth Grant, who I mentioned earlier. Josh Simmons, if you're willing to take a leap on him at 10, but that is something that they would know inside the building. And then you get down to the sort of guys you'd be picking typically at about 18 or 20 if you could get it. But like you said, no trade down partner, which I think is very realistic because you have to think about who would somebody be trading up for. And there isn't that big dangling carrot at the end of the stick this year that's going to entice somebody to spend a very high pick maybe this year or next year to do that.
Yeah, so you'd hope it's Shedeur, and it probably isn't.
Right. And so you might get some lukewarm offers, but you're talking about maybe 70 cents on the dollar for a top 10 pick. So this is the complete, like, you're really in the grinder here. And I go back to my sticky note and I'm like, get a good football player. Like, if they love Kelvin Banks and people are going to howl and they're going to say he's the 20th ranked player, great. What would you do? I mean, again, based off what we've just talked through, would you just, and people that say Mike Green, I'm going to have to say, look, you don't pay enough attention to the Bears. Like, they're not going to take him at 10. They might take him later on down, but they're not taking him at 10. It's not happening. So great player, awesome fit. Of the remaining players, just not a realistic option for Chicago. So, like Kelvin Banks or a wild Emeka Egbuka pick, right? Like Emeka Egbuka as the Amon-Ra St. Brown in Ben Johnson's offense. Like, do you need him? You absolutely don't need him. You have 3 good receivers to start the season with. Is Emeka Egbuka a super high floor player who is automatically going to be your slot and eventually going to be your sort of high end number 2? I think he is. And again, Ben Johnson knows how to use that player archetype super, super well. Is the value there? No, people are going to howl about the value. They're going to say, oh, he's the 25th ranked player. He's the 3rd wide receiver or whatever. He's a great fit for Chicago. You know what you're getting. High character guy, high production guy, Brian Hartline wide receiver. He blocks. He's going to help in the run game. Like, people are going to be like, oh, but the 3rd wide receiver is the 5th or 6th target in a Ben Johnson offense. You're right. But again, you're stuck at 10. What do you want to come out with when you look back at this draft 2 years from now? Do you want to take a wild swing on a tackle who flames out, who's, maybe injured? Come on, Chicago. Like, what that feels like. Don't do that. Like, get a good football player and move on, because that's what you might just have to do. You might not have any great options.
Yeah, and like you said, they're going to howl at these picks. Well, if 100%. It's Hampton, they're going to howl at the 2nd running back in the top 10. If it's if Loveland, same thing, a 2nd tight end. Wide receiver, they just took Odunze. Why did they do it again? Offensive line, that was a reach. Cornerback, the room's loaded already. What are you doing? Like, 100%. There isn't a pick that isn't going to cause that. Like defensive end, like you talked about, Green and Pierce and potential issues there off the field.
Michael Walker, again, great physical specimen.
2.5 last year. Like, he's a
no production.
Like, every one of these picks is going to be an issue. So that's why, I think, if the board falls and a guy like Genty's sitting there, as much as I'm not take a running back in the top 10,
that's right.
I'd accept it. Tyler Warren, like you said, I think because of that, my perfect pick at 10 right now, I've decided, is Will Campbell in terms of what the Bears need, what I think of him as a player. But, I will ask you, and then we'll move on to the 2nd round here. For EJ Snyder, what the Bears' needs are, who realistically could be there. Again, no trade down. Who is the guy that you would circle and say, if the Bears can get this guy at 10, that I will be, that's my number 1 guy for the Bears?
In terms of what's likely to happen.
Yeah, Abdul Carter, you don't get to say.
Yeah, I don't get to say Abdul Carter. I probably don't even get to say Membu, because again, I believe very strongly that he's going to be off the board. For me, I would feel very solid about Genty for all the reasons I said, because I do believe he is a transcendent player, a transcendent talent. After that, it would probably be Tyler Warren. I would not be upset with Colson Loveland. I can see him in the Sam Laporta role. So again, the translation for me, very different player than Warren, but again, I see the fit, I see the usage, and he's very good at his role. And after that, it's, players that people probably don't want. Like, I like Kelvin Banks because I do think he has guard flexibility for the first couple of years and then can play tackle. So it's a better translation for me. Is he a better player than Will Campbell? I don't think he is. Is he a better fit for the Bears? He might be, just because of the versatility and the fact that what do you do with a left tackle that you're not going to play? So it's like, it's not great. It's, and Omarion Hampton, I think he's great. I think he's, it can be a running back one in the NFL. I think he'd be a great fit, but value wise, people are going to howl at RB2 at 10 for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We spent a good chunk there on 10 as I expected, but let's move on to the second round here. Let's start, we'll just kind of clump 39 and 41 together here. Let's start with running back because if the Bears don't take Genty, I think there's a really strong possibility that they take running back here. They don't even wait till round 3. That's just my personal hunch. But let's say Genty and let's say Hampton are off the board. Mm-hmm. If every other running back is available at that point, and they may not be. I understand they, a third or a fourth could go off before that. But if every other running back is available at 39, where are you in terms of these running backs, in terms of a fit with Johnson and what the Bears need?
Yeah, I think this is as uncertain as we are about 10 and as sort of worried as I am about that pick. I feel the complete opposite about 39 and 41. You're getting good football players. The value starts to line up really, really well. If I'm looking at the running back class and those guys are off the board and I'm picking running back with one of these picks, which I might not, I might wait. But if I'm not waiting, I'm probably going to take Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. I really like his fit, style, size, outside runner, but has power as well. Ran a ton of outside zone because that's what they do at Iowa. But I don't think that's all he can do. Love his metrics, love his tape. Just a really, really good football player. If I'm picking between the Ohio State backs, because I know people are going to ask me to, I'm probably taking Quinshawn. Again, Quinshawn and Travion, very different players in terms of what they do. Quinshawn, the sort of heavier hitter, but also has some decent speed. I like his vision better. Travion Henderson, one of the very best pass protectors in this draft and one of the biggest home run hitters, one of the fastest backs in this draft. So just sort of depends on which flavor you want. And then if I was going to wait, the guy I would hope would fall down into the 70s if I wasn't picking running back in 39 or 41 is RJ Harvey out of UCF. Really, really like his game. He's a slasher. He's got speed. He's incredibly well built, can run through contact. And I don't know. I think the league's probably caught on to him at this point. He's probably not going to be available. He's going to go right before that. But again, with value all over the board, if RJ Harvey's sitting there at 72 and I haven't picked a running back, I'm 100% in on that pick.
All right. And let me ask you, defensive line. Actually, let's start offensive line. We'll get defensive line in a second. Sure. Offensive line, tackles, even interior players that might be available there. I know you and I have talked about it off air. I love Tyler Booker. I understand he's not really a fit for the Bears, but what interior offensive linemen or tackles do you think could be available at that spot if the Bears don't take a Will Campbell or a Membu at 10?
Yeah, the one I would hope for, again, that I don't think is going to be there because offensive tackle is much like quarterback. There's a scarcity and that drives up value is Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon.
I thought you might say that. Yep.
Oh yeah. I love Josh Connerly Jr. And do I love him enough to take him at 10? I don't think I do. Would I take him pretty soon after that? Yeah, I would take him in the 20s. I would be okay with that depending on which tackles are coming off the board. He's probably ranked just outside the first round, which again is what we're talking about here, but I believe he'll probably go off beginning of day 2 before the Bears pick if he's still there. If he doesn't and he's sitting there and they did not pick tackle, I would be thrilled with a Josh Connerly Jr. pick at 39.
All right. And on the defensive side of the ball, I think there's some interesting guys there, especially edge and at D tackle. I also think it was interesting about the Bears at Ohio State. And obviously they have both running backs, they have Josh Simmons and all that, but they had a big defensive coach presence there as well at Ohio State. And they have 3 defensive linemen that I think line up potentially at 39-41 for the Bears that I think maybe potential fits there as well. And obviously there's guys outside of the Ohio State trio, but what kind of players do you like on the defensive line, edge or interior, that could be a fit for Dennis Allen?
Yeah, and this is again where I think the world sort of opens up and becomes your oyster, because there are a lot of good both fits and values at edge and at defensive tackle. If we're talking about edge, Nick Skirton from Texas A&M is a player I like a lot, both size-wise and tape production. I think he's a really good fit. Braden Swinson from LSU, one of my favorites in this draft, again, has the power to push offensive tackles back in and be that sort of compressor, pincher guy, but has speed. Doesn't really have bend. He has dip, but he has length. He can get around the edge. Just a really, I think, underrated player who's going to go around this range when it's all said and done. And I think he'd be a great fit for the Bears. And you mentioned JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State, and I love him. He is if you look at his analytics profile, he's not quite as analytically, he doesn't get the analytics shine that his running mate at Ohio State on the other side does in Jack Sawyer, but like JT is the player that I would pick for the Bears. He is heavy-handed. He is a great edge setter. He is more than a cleanup guy, but I think he is a little less pass rush than the other two guys I talked about, Skirton and Swinson. But again, there's three good players in that range that they're probably not all going to be gone. And if you want to go edge with 39 or 41, one of those guys lines up really well value-wise. And then the defensive tackle class is the same way because you can't pick them all. I'm not a huge fan of Tyleik Williams, who's the third defender from Ohio State you mentioned. I think he's more of a run stopper, and people are projecting pass rush that I didn't really see. If Walter Nolan or Derek Harmon slips to either one of those picks, I don't think they will. I think they'll probably both be off the board. I'd be fine with it. I actually really like Darius Alexander out of Toledo as well. And he I'm not going to say probably. He might be there, but I think physically he's a really good fit, had a tremendous Senior Bowl. Everybody's like, well, he plays at Toledo. Strength of competition. Went to the Senior Bowl and kicked the ass of most of the top players in the country, which was great. And then I really like Alfred Collins. I know people have slipped on him a little bit and that he's quote unquote falling. This is the defensive tackle out of Texas, extremely long, versatile position wise on the inside, which would be great for the Bears because with their current defensive tackle rotation, you could always have Collins in there as quote unquote the other guy. And those are very, very useful players. I think he's still ascending too. He's a young player. He's figuring it out. There's a big jump between last year and this year on his tape. And I think there's probably another one coming even when he gets to the pros. Huge guy, big range, can cover two gaps. I really like Alfred Collins, but he would be the sort of outlier at like 41, or maybe they trade down with one of those picks, 10 or 15 picks and he's still there. Alfred Collins would be a great get for them.
Well, let me ask you about that trade down because, and again, I know it's almost impossible to do when you can't see exactly what the board looks like. But like you said, there are enough players that should be available at 39 and 41 where you would sit there and say, that's a loaded spot to select. So while we say it may be difficult for the Bears to trade down at 10, it might be pretty easy for the Bears to trade down at 41 because there may be enough guys that teams are going to be looking to come up and grab one of these guys. So in terms of the Bears with the holes they have and what you know about this board as best you can project, if the opportunity comes for the Bears to trade down 10, 12 spots from those second round picks and pick up another third. So they're dropping from 41 to, 52, something like that. And then of course they'd be getting whatever it'd be 80, 85, whatever it is coming back the other way. Do you like that as a strategy? Would you like to get another pick in that, 80 to 90 range if it means dropping back 10, 12 spots?
I would love it in this draft because there are going to be guys that the Bears have on their board that are much higher rated on their board than somebody else's who they see as sliding, who other teams are just sort of avoiding. And there's so many of them that you're going to potentially pick up a starter, even with that, whichever pick you pick up by sliding down. And again, some of these running backs are not really, they're like graded out. They're probably going to go in the 50s or the 60s, right? So if you don't want to pick one and you want another pick later on, you're still going to get a good running back, even if you don't pick one in the 50s, even if you wait until 72. There's a ton of good interior offensive linemen, guys like Jonas Avainea out of Arizona. I think he's a guard and he's going to be a great one, like a great one. And he's going to go somewhere in like that.
And I just thought Bears are going to be meeting with him.
Yeah, no, I would love him as a fit. Like if they're not done with the offensive line, you really, as you get into like this 50 to 80 range, there are a ton of good guards, not a ton of good centers, like till the very end of that range typically is where I'd be picking up a center specifically in this draft. But there are a ton of really good and versatile guards. Donovan Jackson, another guy from Ohio State who played guard and then got forced into playing tackle when Josh Simmons went down. So he's got experience in both. Actually acquitted himself really well at tackle for not having played there. A guy like that with great flexibility, he's going to get picked somewhere in probably the late 50s to early 70s. So, if you could trade down and pick up a guy like that and say, okay, what Ben said when I saw him at the combine when he did his presser there was you don't need 5 guys, you need 8, right? So we need to find our best 8 on the offensive line because with attrition, you're not playing 5 guys in the NFL over a 17 game season. You need 8 guys. So while we think we have our 5 or maybe even 6, we're not done yet. And a guy like Donovan Jackson would go a long way for a need like that.
Yeah, and I've talked about this a lot this off season about it's nice what and I even mentioned it to you at the beginning. It's nice what the Bears have done in terms of kind of fixing this offensive line and going out and getting guys, but it does not work long term. You cannot buy an offensive line. You need to draft an offensive line. They need to start creating a pipeline. Jonah Jackson is not a slam dunk. He's coming off injuries. He some performance issues. Drew Dolman missed his games, has missed significant games the last couple of years. Joe Tooney's 32. They need to you can't just run in with Bill Murray and Ryan Bates and think you're okay. Like they need to start building that pipeline, which has been probably my biggest frustration with Ryan Poles to this point.
Sure.
Is that like, and I don't know if you realize this because I keep bringing this up to people and people go, really, is that true? And then it hits them and it's true. The highest interior offensive lineman that Ryan Poles has selected through 3 drafts is Zach Thomas.
No, I get it. You and I have been on the same side of the table here because, as you know, mine has been interior, but really center for 3 years. JB and I started it. You mentioned that I was on Windy City for a long time, Bears Over Beers with Jeff Berkus. We were all over Creed Humphrey. We wanted Creed Humphrey to be a Bear so badly, and I never really gave up that charge. I was the guy standing up on top of the hill with a bugle going, center, come on, fix it. And they just wouldn't. And so the Dolman signing was a bit of a relief. I could finally, put the bugle down and sit down and take a rest. But they're not done yet, right? If Dolman goes down with a twisted ankle, like maybe it's Ricky Stromberg if he's healthy. But again, in that trade down scenario you offered, if you pick up a pick in the 80s and Jared Wilson's sitting there from Georgia, like, go get him because, a couple of years from now, he's the great backup for now. And a couple of years from now, or, as an injury fill in, he might be one of those guys that comes in and they go, hey, we don't have to pay Drew Dolman for more than 2 years. We've got a successor in-house in Jared Wilson, who's young and athletic and works really well and has gotten to be around, again, all these great linemen and have this example set for him. The Bears have not had that luxury. It's just been such a turnstile, treadmill, whatever you want to call it, that nobody's had that chance to settle in and learn and be in a system and be comfortable and really develop. And wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we've talked a lot about trenches here. We've talked a lot about running backs. I mean, obviously we know that's kind of where the Bears need to focus a lot. Tight end is obviously another position. I know we talked about Warren and Loveland. Let's kind of play with that 3rd round pick right now. Let's assume they only have one.
Yep.
I think a couple interesting position groups there, assuming they've hit up some trenches and running back at that point. I think one position is tight end because, like you said, they do not really have a second tight end at this point in the off season. And the other one is safety. And while that's not like an urgent need here, there's a good chance that Byard and Brisker will not be on this team next year for obviously different reasons. Brisker because he's just not on the field very much. And can you extend a guy that has that many concussion problems, and Byard just because of age and the contract's expiring? So are there any tight ends or safeties that you have a 3rd round grade on that you think would be potentially good fits for the Bears?
It's a great question, and I love it because I had conflicting or countered views of these 2 position groups coming in. I really thought tight end was super deep and really strong. Actually came away from early tape work in the All-Star games and the Combine thinking, maybe it's not quite as deep as I thought. And I thought the other about safety, I thought, man, safety's really thin. There's a couple, 3, 4 good players, and there's not a lot else there. The more I've dug into the safety class, it's come up and tight ends come down a little bit. So I love that sort of juxtaposition. But there are a couple of tight ends. I think Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon would be a good player in right around that range. And the other one is Gunnar Helm, who I might actually pick above Terrence Ferguson. He's currently graded on a lot of boards below that, but I really like Gunnar Helm, the Texas tight end. He twisted his ankle stopping on his 40. So he had a false start in the 40 and he rolled his ankle badly, like super badly. We kind of missed it at the time because he ran it anyways. And then he went out and ran all the drills, did all the blocking, and like the next day posted a picture of his ankle and it's all black and blue and about the size of a softball. And he ran on that. And everybody's like, oh, he ran slower than I thought. And oh, he didn't look as agile. And I'm like, he was literally running on one leg. His tape is great. I think he's a very underrated player. So he's a guy that I would look to, down the board. Some people might say that pick at the 70s is a little high for him. I actually think he would probably pay that off, especially playing for Ben. And at safety,
no.
Well, it's not that it's that range, right?
Right.
Like, a little above that, you might get a guy like Kevin Winston Jr., who was injured, Penn State safety. I mean, stop me if you've heard this one, Bears fans, but super rangy, big hitter. I actually really like Kevin Winston Jr. I think he's just kind of out of sight, out of mind, which is the reason that ranking's so far down there. He's got great size. And then it really drops down to about the sort of 95 to like 115 mark. And there's another sweet spot for me there with Drew Makuba, the safety out of Texas, and Jonas Sanker, the safety out of Virginia, who absolutely reminds me of Brisker a little bit on tape, like Brisker at Penn State. And that's a good thing. That's complimentary. So, at 70, no. But again, if they trade down, they get a pick in the late 80s or early 90s. Like, I would be thrilled with Drew Makuba at that point. That would be, and I believe he's slated for a visit. There was some sort of buzz about that after they went to the Texas Pro Day that Makuba was going to be one of their 30 visits. And then people were saying, oh, that's not confirmed. So I'm not sure whether he is, but I kind of want to will that into existence because I think he'd be a great player for the Bears. And I'm with you that Byard is, at the end of his string, and Brisker, great player when he's on the field, but with concussions and that many over a young career at a position where he's going to have to hit hard or he can't play well. It's a much bigger need than people think on paper. They look on paper, they go, oh, they're fine. They got 2. Well, do they? They really have like a half going into next year. So you could pick up a young one here that is very good. Give me your seasoning. They don't have to play this year, and it would be a good value.
All right. To wrap up here, let's just throw a few names out for day 3. I love 4th round picks. I'm bummed the Bears don't have one. Yeah. I think there's just it's always a sweet spot to find some really good players. But that aside, assuming they don't get one here at some point with a trade back, looking at 5th round picks and later, who are some names, any positions that you think might be really fun selections for either Ben Johnson or Dennis Allen?
On pure fun in terms of down the board, he's risen up boards as people have gotten to his tape. But Billy Bowman Jr., the safety from Oklahoma, he is an absolute like kamikaze artist. He will come up and smack you in the mouth. He's a little bit undersized. So again, grades are all over the board. Some people have him as a top 100 player. Some people wouldn't touch him before 150. That's the kind of thing we're going to see in this draft all over the place. But I love his play style. I love his athleticism. I think he's got the right mentality. There's a bunch of receivers. People say this receiver class is terrible, and I think we just got really spoiled with great receiver classes. And there's a lot of depth here down the board. We're talking about in the top 100, like Savion Williams, the very tall wide receiver out of TCU, and people like, oh, TCU, and he had drop issues and whatever else. He's a great athlete, ran the Wildcat for them pretty often this year, was a high school quarterback, and actually runs the ball really, really well. So I know people are going to like have nightmares of like a supercharged Villas Jones, but like, I think he's a super fun player. And then farther down, a guy that everybody's forgetting about is Torrey Horton from Colorado State, currently ranked in like the 150s or something. Again, you don't necessarily need a wide receiver, but like Torrey Horton is really, really good. And he's just kind of buried in this draft for, I don't know why. I went back couple weeks ago, did my full workup on him because he might have come out last year. So I started doing a workup, and then he went back to school. So he's a guy I had to go back and kind of refresh on. I just reminded myself of like how good that guy is. Like he's a really, really good player that nobody's talking about. So down the board, he'd be super fun. Let me see if I can. Oh, well, Sean Dolak, but that's not fair. He's going to be a Bill. University of Buffalo linebacker, one of my defensive gems this year for Bootleg. Just one of those players that I kind of watched for fun early in the process. I was like, this guy's maybe a UDFA. Sean Dolak's getting drafted, and he probably should get drafted in like the bottom of the fourth or the top of the fifth based on what he is as a football player. He's really, really good. And a lot of people don't know his name because he played at Buffalo. So I love Dolak. Do they need a linebacker? They really don't. Would he be an instant fan favorite once he made the field? He would. He is a very skilled, very hard-nosed player that I think would be a lot of fun. But, again, I think he's going to be a Bill.
All right. Well, there he is. At Football EJ on Twitter. Make sure you give him a follow if you haven't already. And of course, you've got Bootleg Football with Brett Coleman and the Bear Era podcast. Make sure you check out both those. EJ, thanks for so much time. This is always a great conversation. I always enjoy it, and I look forward to it a year from now.
Yeah, I love this one every year. Thank you for continuing to have me back. We started this quite a while ago at this point.
Long time ago.
And it is one of the ones that I put a mark on the calendar, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be so much fun. And it always is. So thanks for that.
All right. Well, there he is, EJ Snyder. Thanks, everybody. We will be back with one more podcast before the NFL draft. Bear down, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Adios.